Shabbat Shalom, Happy Sabbath. This morning we are thankful that Yah has continued his life in us, and we are thankful beyond words. This morning we would like to look at the subject, the Commonwealth of Yisrael, the Commonwealth of Israel. And many of us who were brought up in the islands, the Caribbean, are perhaps more familiar with what a commonwealth or what a kingdom is. Most people in other parts are not familiar with the way a kingdom works. They are used to a republic. Some are used to a dictatorship. But we in the Caribbean, we were colonized by the British. The British system is one you would call a constitutional monarchy, which means that the king reigns, but he doesn't rule. He divests powers to Parliament that rules. And it is the objective of the colonizers to provide for the colony. But in many of the cases that we know of, the colonizers, particularly in the case of the continent of Africa, they took more from the colony than they put into the colony. And Africa being a woman, you could say that, and reasonably so, that Africa was gang raped by the Europeans. That's what they did. In fact, in 1884, there was a conference in Berlin, Germany, in which 14 countries of Europe, they met in Berlin, and the objective of which was to decide what part of Africa each of them would get. Up until 1884, 10% of Africa had been in the hands of these Europeans. But post the conference, which lasted almost 2 months, in fact, it was on the 15th of November. Interesting. It's a kind of a memorial of that this month. After the conference, 90% of Africa went into the hands of the Europeans, and they carved up Africa like a turkey, a Thanksgiving turkey. And Africa came under what they say was democracy. Democracy, an invention of the Greeks. And so we want to look at that. After they had carved up Africa, and each of these colonizers, the British, the French, Portuguese, Belgium, the Belgians, they had all carved up the continent of Africa that Yah had so blessed. Because we read in the book of Bereshit chapter 2 and verse 10. Let's go there. Genesis chapter 2 and verse 10. It says that, and the river went forth out of Eden to water the garden. I'm reading from verse 10. And from there it divided and became 4 riverheads. The name of the first was Pishon. It is that one surrounding the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. Hear me. And the gold of that land is good. Not just gold, it is good. Bdellium is there, and the Shoam stone is telling you diamond is there too. And the name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Cush. This land, this river, surrounds all of Africa. And the name of the third river is the Iddekel. It is the one which goes towards the east of Ashur, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. The point here I want you to understand here is that when a country colonizes another one, then whatever is in the host country should be in the colony. And Yah's intent from the very inception of time was to colonize earth and make earth a colony of heaven. And therefore he taught us, when you pray, you must pray this way: let thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. He wants to bring the culture, the influence of heaven on earth, so that earth as a colony will look like heaven. He wants us to know that. And therefore, we then have access to all the resources of heaven. That's what it is. So, let the kingdom come down to earth. And let earth be influenced in every way by the culture, the glory of Yah. Yah in Habakkuk 2:14, he says, my glory will cover the earth even as the water covers the sea. He wants you to know that. That's his intent, that earth would look like that, and earth would be influenced by the laws of heaven. When we were in the Caribbean, although we lived in the Caribbean, we were governed by the laws of England. That's how it was. And so when a country comes to colonize you, the intent was to, or is to, make sure that that colony looks like theirs. That's why today you go to Africa, some of those countries, they speak Portuguese, some French, some English. And all that happened in this meeting here in Berlin in 1884, that these ravenous men met and decided what part of Africa they would get. And by the time you know, we no longer speak our own language. We speak theirs. We no longer wear our own names. we have their names. But unlike the kingdom of heaven, that wanted earth to have the culture of heaven, the resources of heaven, they took from and raped the countries of Africa. And so when we talk about the Commonwealth, the wealth was never common among Africans from those who captured it. But I read earlier chapter 2 of Genesis. The first thing Yah does is letting the people know that which is in heaven, I want it to be on earth. And he tells them, there is gold there in that land. There is bdellium there. There is onyx there. There is diamond there, because whatever is in heaven must be on earth, because I am colonizing earth to be a colony of this kingdom. Pray that way. And so we have men like David Livingstone, who is a Protestant missionary, and he goes to Africa in 1855. And the natives takes him along the Zambezi River. And he's there, and no Europeans have seen this before. And he is looking, and he's amazed of what he saw. And he saw that great falls. And he's struck by its beauty, because Yah made it that way. Remember, he's a missionary. And he goes home, and he names the fall, the Victoria Fall, after Queen Victoria. And they then wrote subsequently that he discovered the Victoria Falls. Even though they know that he was being transported on the river and shown these things for the first time and put it in their textbook, and we come along and say he discovered it in 1855, as if Africa did not exist at that time. We read in the first century that the Ethiopian eunuch was in Gaza, and he was reading from the book of Isaiah. We read that, and we ignore that. We read in 1 Kings chapter 10, the Queen of Sheba had come to meet King Solomon. We read all that. And we trace our history. We know that Haile Selassie, that came from that Solomonic dynasty, was the 225th descendant from King Solomon. We know all that. And yet, they conquered us. They conquered us, and we were colonized. And they gave us this democracy. Clisthenes, the man who invented democracy, the Greek. Oh yes. And they had three branches of government: the ecclesia, the boule, and the discatia. That's the democracy that they gave us. And they changed everything. And I just want to read for you what the Greeks did with Israel. Come with me to the book of the Maccabees. The Maccabees. Now, I'm reading here from a 1832 edition of the King James Bible. And I'm reading Maccabee 1, because when we look at the Word of Yah, and when we come to the Old Testament, the end of it, we come to Malachi. When we look at Malachi, we read that the Medes and the Persians are in power. The Persians are in power. But when we turn to the next book in the New Testament, the book of Matthew, we see Rome in power. And 400 years have elapsed between Malachi and Matthew. Meaning, there is no trace in the word, our common Bible here, of the Greek Empire. So we miss all that. They took it out. Because, as I indicated here, I'm reading from the King James Version, the 1832. It was subsequent to that they took it out. But let me read. It says, "And it happened that after Alexander of Philip, the Macedonians who came out of the land of Chittim had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and the Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece." Alexander the Great. And his father was one who was taught by Aristotle, who a student of Plato, who is a student of Socrates. These are the Greeks, and they gave us democracy. And today we're living in a land called America that boasts that it is the great defender of democracy. Now, why am I laboring this point? Because the kingdom that we're dealing with is not a democracy. The king's law is the word, and the word is the law. When the king speaks, it is law. You don't vote a king into office. He's born that way. It's an inherited dynasty, the kingdom. And that's what we belong to. And therefore, when we have need of anything, we access the kingdom. That's why Yeshua said, you don't have because you don't ask. So the word says that Greece was in power. Verse 2, "And he made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he exalted and his heart was lifted up, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries to him." This is colonization. Notice, they did not put into the country. They took from it and make the native speak their language. With the kingdom of Yah, Yah says, whatever is in heaven must be on earth. We read in the word in Revelation certainly that there's gold there, streets of gold. And the first thing he said, that land down here where that river is, that encircles Africa, is gold. And the Europeans read that, they heard that, and they said, we'll meet. And we will carve up that land, and we will take the resources, the blessings to the people, but we won't put anything in. We will not put anything in. But I hear David writing, and David in Psalm 68 verse 31 says, princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch forth his hands unto Yah one day. And we are seeing many of the Caribbean countries and elsewhere, African countries, are saying enough is enough. We're now making sure that we don't have any heads of state in Europe. Barbados is now a republic. Jamaica is poised to do the same thing. Oh, yes. But in light of all that, it is still a corrupt system. That's what democracy is. Democracy is good for people who don't trust each other. They call it a balance of power. In America here, we have the executive branch. We say that's the president, the executive branch. And then we have the Congress that makes laws. Who doesn't trust the president? And the president doesn't trust Congress, and they never see eye to eye. And then we have the judicial branch, who tries all of them, and sometimes even send them to prison. We've seen in recent time the Congress impeaching presidents. Tells you that they don't get along. So democracy is good for people who cannot trust each other. That's what it is. And so let's continue with the Maccabees. When they captured Israel and Egypt, the word here says, I'm reading from verse 9 now, and after his death, it is Alexander the Great, he reigned about 12 years, because he died at about age 33. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them many years, and evil were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage in Rome. And he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. And Ptolemy, as you know, ruled North Africa, ruled Egypt. North Africa was ruled even then by the Greeks. But Ptolemy was afraid of him, Antiochus Epiphanes. Verse 19, thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. Did you hear that? He took the spoil. I said earlier, the one who colonizes the colony should be the one putting in, so that the colony looks like the wealth in the one who colonizes it. So the Commonwealth that we talk about, the wealth was not common. Jamaica was never as rich as Britain, neither Barbados, St. Kitts, Bermuda. They were not as rich. The wealth did not stretch all the way out. They raped and ravaged the resources because they knew, according to Genesis chapter 2 and verse 10, that there's gold in the land. Yah put it there because when Yah said you must pray, that the kingdom that is in heaven will come on earth. He's saying, whatever it is that we have here, you must have it too. And that's why when Yeshua spoke to his disciples, and they said to him, show us the Father. He said, have you been so long with me and you have not known the Father? Because whatever is in heaven, I came to bring it to you. So we're told that according to Esdras, when the earth was made, it was 6 part earth and 1 part water. But now we are told that there is 71% of water in the earth, and the rest is earth after the flood. In Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 18, Yah says, I did not make the earth to be void. I made it to be inhabited. So how did it come void? How? Because Satan, according to Ezekiel chapter 28, came down here and sought to bring his culture on the earth. And so this morning we really want to focus now, having looked at democracy and what it stands for, really look at what Yah's intent was to colonize the earth and to make it like heaven. So as we speak confidently. And the word of Yah is incontestable. It's that. Incontestable. It is univocal. It is unequivocal. It is indubitable. The truth of which we bring to you, it is irrefutable. It is unassailable. And therefore it must be undeniable, unerringly. And so the word we want to capture all of this that is placed in the word is apocalyptic. That word. Apodictic. That means the confidence of which we speak, it's not of our own. Not of our own. So come with me to the book, the scripture that was read earlier in Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 2. The word says that, and you were dead in trespasses and sin. That's how Satan left us. In which you once walked according to the course of the world, according to the ruler of authority in the air of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Paul here writes, and he's wanting you to know that those of you who are a bit disobedient to the word, Satan is leading you. Among whom also we are once lived and lust of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, and also the rest. But Elohim, who is rich in compassion, because of his great love, with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Messiah. By favor you have been saved. You have been colonized. And raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah, Yeshua, in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding riches of his favor in kindness toward us in Messiah, Yeshua. Verse 10, for we are his workmanship created in the Messiah, Yeshua, unto good works, which Elohim prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Therefore remember that you were once nations. Let's read it again for emphasis. Therefore remember that you, once nations in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcised, by what is called the circumcision made in the flesh by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship, you were excluded from the Commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. You were excluded from the Commonwealth of Israel. But now you have been colonized by Israel. And you say, how so? How so? Very simple. Galatians 3:29, if you be in Yeshua, you then are Abraham's seed, and heirs according to the promise. So every person who is baptized in Yeshua is an Israelite. I know, and I've said it so often, that people go around and say, well, I'm a Baptist. Others say, I'm a Pentecostal. Others say, I'm a Catholic. I'm a Jehovah's Witness. But the Word wants you to know that all these are members of one body. Members of one body. And therefore, you are an Israelite. He said, I'm going to make a covenant, and who am I going to make it with? I'm going to make it with Israel, and I'm going to make it with the house of Judah. You read that in Jeremiah 31 to 33. You read it also in Hebrews 10 and verse 16. You read it in Hebrews 8 and verse 10. He said, I'm going to make a covenant with Israel, not with denominations. And if there be no covenant, there is no kingdom. And so this morning, as we discussed marriage, we sometimes miss the very essence of what it's about. They came to Yeshua and they asked him, can a man divorce his wife for anything? And he said no. They said, but Moses gave us this certificate to give to those who we're finished with. They were pointing to Deuteronomy chapter 24. But Yeshua said to them, it was never so from the very beginning, quoting Genesis 2:24. A man leaves his parents and he cleaves to his wife, and the two become one flesh. But most people don't seem to understand what Yeshua was doing. He was saying that under the Melchizedek order, the law, the Ten Commandments, the covenant, the book of the covenant, there is no provision for divorce. It's forever. Only the sleep of death should separate it. That's what he's saying. That's why he went back to Genesis, because from Genesis all the way to Exodus, that was under the Melchizedek order. So in Exodus, the book of Shemot, chapter 19, verses 5 and 6, Yah said to the children of Israel, if you obey me, you will be to me a kingdom of priests. They said, whatever you say, Yah, we will do. Meaning, they accept what he said by faith. So, Moses went up to Mount Sinai to get a copy of the contract, the covenant. We call it tablets of stones. And by the time he returned, having spent 40 days, we're told they fell in love with a golden calf. And as a consequence of that, meaning that the covenant was now broken, the Melchizedek order, the book of the covenant was broken. So he said, I will then impose on them, hear me, because in a covenant there are two elements. There's offer and there is acceptance. Yah says, if you do such, I will do such. They said, yes, we will. But notice in the Levitical order, there was no such agreement. He imposed it, and after he imposed it, it was put in the side of the ark. According to Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 26. It was put in the side where, that's the book of the law put in the side. But the book of the covenant was put inside the ark where Aaron's rod was and the manna. And so we have to make that distinction. So what Ephesians here is saying, that once upon a time you were outside of covenant. But since Yeshua came, his intent was to colonize you and to bring you under the portfolio and the administration of the kingdom. And you are no longer what you were. You are now a citizen of heaven, and therefore you're in the Commonwealth of Israel. And so when you're in the Commonwealth, you live according to the laws of the king. You don't vote the king into power like democracy. You don't do that. In fact, in the Greek democracy, the people were not voted, they didn't vote for a leader. Lots were drawn. So in truth, we have never seen democracy in terms of how it was intended to be. We've never seen it. So the king is letting you know here that you are now colonized. You are an Israelite. That's what you are. You are now subjugated. That's what you are. Socially, economically, and spiritually. You're equal to what heaven has. And that's why you see in Daniel chapter 10, while Daniel was in Babylon and he was having some problems, Daniel did not call the police in Babylon. In fact, you know, in democracy in Greek, when democracy was established, there was no policeman in Greece, in Athens. None. And if you went to court, there was no defending barrister. You had to prosecute the case yourself. So that which we see in America and elsewhere is democracy gone wrong. And so we have to come back to the kingdom. Oh yes. We have to come back to the kingdom. When Greece took Egypt and took Israel, they began to celebrate the Feast of Bacchus, which they would do on the 3rd of September, which is a Roman god. They changed the feast of Yah. That's what democracy does. It gives you Christmas, gives you Halloween, all those things. Yah says, my feasts in Leviticus chapter 23, these must be kept. And so what colonization has done to us has really made us a people who have become dependent on other people other than the Creator himself. Yes, and I want to make man, and I want to make him in my own image, to look like me. And the resources that are in the kingdom will be his resources. And so when we read chapter 28 of Ezekiel and we see Satan walking on gold and all those gems, that's what the kingdom looks like. Either there is an Eden in heaven, or that was the Eden on earth. And Yah is saying, if you seek me first, the kingdom, all the things that you desire will be added unto you. All of that. So in Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 15, he says, having abolished in his flesh the enemy or the enmity, the Torah of the commands in dogma, so as to create in himself one renewed man from the two, thus making peace. I spoke earlier and I said that when the book of the covenant was broken, Yah imposed on the children of Israel the book of the law. And many people today still cannot see that. There is a distinction between the book of the covenant and the book of the law. So when Paul writes and says the law is done away with, Paul is not talking about the book of the covenant, which is the Ten Commandments. He's talking about the book of the law. That's done away with. And that is the hindrance that we're reading here in Ephesians chapter 2. That was stopping us becoming that new person. So that had to be abolished, taken out of the way. But people read that and they say, the law is done away with. The law is abolished. And of course, the next question that you should ask them is, he said he also abolished death. Does that mean you won't die? So then, if you understand that, abolish doesn't mean it means an hindrance. That was in the way. And not only that, only those things that are in ordinances and dogma were abolished. Not the book of the covenant. That was never abolished. We've got to understand all that. And understand, those of us who have lived in this colonial system, who we really are. We've got to understand that. Some of you, because of your clipped British accent, cut glass, or your beautiful French, you think you're one of them. But let me read Zephaniah chapter 3. Zephaniah chapter 3, and we're reading from verse 9, and it says, for then will I return to the people a pure language. Implicit in that statement is that the language you now have is not yours. He's going to give you back your original language. And if you go back all the way to Genesis chapter 11, you see that up until that time, all the world had one language. All the world, including Nimrod, who was king at that time, spoke Hebrew. So when you tell me that English is this and French is this and German is that, the word says all those languages, they are derivative of Babylon. That's what the word says. So he says in Zephaniah, or should I say Sophania. Let's not change his name. Sophania. I'm going to give you a pure language that they may all call upon the name of Yahweh to serve him with one consent. There will be no denominational differences. You will see things as they are, because the scales would have been removed. And your blindness, which has been an impediment to you, will no longer be so, because you will have the right pronunciation and the right language to understand. You will no longer call me Jesus or Lord. You will call me Yahweh and Yeshua. Because that's what the angel came down and said, his name shall be called Yeshua. It is the prerogative of a father to name his son, and not for his neighbor or his church to change his name. We've got to understand that. Now, Sophania continues. He says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, hear me? Now, this prophet has something up his sleeve, doesn't he? Remember we read earlier in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 10, and Yah starts out by saying, the river that comes from Eden, that encircles all of Ethiopia. If you follow that trajectory, that geography, you will see some blessing there that I've put in the earth for them and for Africa. The Europeans knew this, but our people seem to have forgotten this. And so it is my intent, it was Moses' intent to let the people go. It's my intent to let the people know. And so I'm using Sophania here. Sophania says, and from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, my worshippers, even the daughter of my dispersed. We went to the same English school, don't we? So what does dispersed mean? To be scattered, isn't it? You're not all in one place. You are scattered. Not lost, just scattered. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my dispersed people, he said, they shall bring an offering at the end time to me. So if Ethiopia or Africa is Yah's dispersed people, who are those claiming to be his dispersed? You got to ask yourself that question, isn't it? The word here by the prophet Sophania, we call Zephaniah, he's saying, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, these are Yah's dispersed people. And I know my people, when they read this, they say, well, who is this man, Sophania? Who is Zephaniah? Well, let me introduce you to him. Come with me to chapter 1. He says, the word of Yah which came unto Sophania, the son of Cushi. Who? One of your ancestors. He's saying, my daddy is Cushi. The son of Gedaliah. Hold on. You mean Gedaliah? Yes, I mean Gedaliah. Gedaliah was made governor of Judah in the time that Nebuchadnezzar came to Israel and besieged Jerusalem. What? I'm just trying to show you your lineage and where you came from, even though when they colonized you, they called your blessed land the land of darkness, the dark continent. That's how they demeaned you. And though they were demeaning you, they were taking and ravaging your country. And you know, they talk about the Industrial Revolution in Europe and elsewhere. You know that it was built on your backs. It was built on your resources. And that's why they are fighting to keep Africa, because they know that if Africa let go, then Europe will become poor. They know that. But they tell you, we are there to civilize them. When we have in Africa civilization buried under the sand that predates anything that you have in Europe. We know that because the word says that. Nimrod went and he was king, and he built cities all over the place. That's what the word says. So, Sophonius says, the word of Yah came unto me, the son of Cushi. Anywhere you go, either in Greek or in Hebrew, Cushi means black. All right? The son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Ezekiah. Ezekiah was one of Israel's good king, Judah's good king, Ezekiah. So he's tracing his lineage, his inheritance, all the way to Ezekiah in the days of Josiah. He says, my daddy is Cushi, and that's the line that I come from. And I'm a prophet sent by Yah. And in the day when Africa, Ethiopia, stretch his hands out, they're going to bring an offering. What offering? The covenant. The Ten Commandments that are in Axum. They're going to bring that to me as an offering. Oh, yes. They're going to bring it. Because these Europeans, they have really done you bad. And so, perhaps, like Thomas, you're not convinced that you could be who the Bible says you are, and the people who claim to be you are not you. So let's turn to Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 9, and verse 27. The word here says, let Elohim, what? In some word it says enlarge Japhet, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem. So many of the people who are here claiming to be Jews, Moses, who took dictation from Yah on Mount Sinai, wants you to know that they are just dwelling in tents of Shem. They're not Shemites. And so you begin to think now, and of course it makes sense that you would want to think, because all we have to do is to go over to chapter 10 and read verse 4 and 5. And it says, and the sons of Yawan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim and Dodanim, from these the coastland people of the nations were separated into the lands, everyone according to his language, according to their clans into the nation. In verse 3 it says, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz. We know that 90+% of the people in Israel today claim to be Ashkenazi. But Moses here says the Ashkenazi, they're Gentiles. And we're not wanting to be controversial in any way, but we just cannot add to or take away from the word. And so we read in Hebrews chapter 1 that, that Yah has spoken to us in all sundry times. And therefore he's now speaking to us through his Son. And therefore we must listen to his testimony. Come with me to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 9. It says, I know your works and the pressure and the poverty, yet you are rich, and the blasphemy of those who say they are Yehudim, they are Jews, but are not, they are of the synagogue of Satan. Now, this ought to give you reason for pause, should it not? We read in Genesis 9:27 that Japheth's descendants, who are part of the Gentiles, they're dwelling in Shem's tent. They're not Shem, but they're Japheth, but they're living in Shem's house. They're living in Israel. That's what the word is trying to say. They now claim to be Jews according to Yeshua here, and you can understand why some of them say the Messiah has not yet come. Because if the Messiah has not yet come, then somebody else must have said this. Said he's not come. But he repeats this. So come with me to Revelation chapter 3 and verse 9. He says, what? See, I am giving up those of the congregation of Satan. Wow. Who say they are Yehudim, who say they are Jews, and are not, but lie. They what? They lie. See, I am making them come to worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. So to Smyrna and to Philadelphia, what is he saying? He says, you have some people who are claiming to be Jews. But what interests me also, he could easily have said, they are of the church of Satan. But he says they are of the synagogue of Satan. And so when we link this with what Sophania is saying, then we have a different picture from what they have taught us. And if ever we should stumble across Isaiah chapter 18, and we read, woe to the land shadowed with whirring wings, which is beyond the rivers of Cush, which sends envoy by sea and into the vessels of reed on the water, saying, go, swift messenger, to a nation tall and smooth-skinned, to a people dreaded from the beginning onward. We were dreaded by the people. And how did we become so lame and tame and full of shame? How? And people dread us then? How? How? He said, when I made the earth and I allocated all the land, I did it, what? In relation to the children of Israel. That's how I did it. That's us. And so when we migrated from Israel to Africa, to Benin, to Ghana, to Guinea, to Nigeria, to all of Africa, where the gold and the diamonds and the rubies were. And he left the caves in Europe. The Europeans came to Africa, and they saw all the blessings that are there, and they spend it. They say, we're going to the dark continent, and we're going to liberate them and civilize them. But they took the resources and made themselves fat while we became weak. It's in the Word. They changed your name. And you are no longer Kunti Kinti. You're more like Mr. Smith and Mr. Brown and Mr. White. That's who you are. And to even conceive the thought that you're an Israelite is beyond the comprehension. Even though you read in chapter 10 of 1 King that the Queen of Sheba, your ancestor, went there, met Solomon, and came back and made the place awash with that kind of worship. That even the Falasha Jews, they still do that now, and you are caught up in Constantine religion, even though heaven wants to colonize you. Pray, let thy kingdom come on earth. Not democracy, thy kingdom come. Should we talk about the Coleman diamond? Or should we talk about the Star of Africa? Those beautiful diamonds that are still there, placed in London. Should we? Oh, yes. Should we talk about all that was taken from India? When we read of Queen Esther, we're told King Ahasuerus had 127 provinces all the way from Ethiopia to India. That's the word. It's like a game of poker, isn't it? That you who had the good hand, you had a royal flush, and Europe bluffed you out of it. You didn't lose because you had a bad hand. You lose because they bluffed you out of your resources. That's what happened. They didn't have any hand. They met on the 15th of November, 1884, in Berlin. And this is why, it doesn't surprise me why Berlin ended up the way it did. Doesn't surprise me at all. You remember what happened in Berlin during the war. And the wall was put up. Fenced them out morally because of what they did. And if that doesn't cause you to jolt, go back and read the letter to Pergamos. Shall we? Let's go there. Read the letter to Pergamos. That's in Revelation. Let's read it. Because we sometimes, seem as if we've missed what is going on. Because as I indicated this morning Yah sent 7 letters to the assemblies, and he said to John, I want you to take these letters to all the assemblies, because they represent not only assemblies in Turkey, but they represent epochs and time. And he's saying in the book here of Pergamos, he's saying, this is where Satan's seat is. Satan's seat is in Turkey, in Pergamos, where they worship Zeus. You get what I'm saying? So, why did you mention that, Elder? Because the altar of Zeus, was found by a German man, and he picked up everything from the altar of Zeus and brought it to Berlin. It's there now. The altar of Zeus where they worship Satan. He brought it to Germany, in Berlin. And so it doesn't surprise me one bit that it was in Berlin that they met to carve up Africa. And thereafter, Berlin ended up the way it did, until the walls came down. You remember Mr. Reagan? Bring the walls down, Mr. Gorbachev. But it was only prophecy unfolding in front of our very eye. If only we could see that. We see something in politics, but it is prophecy. What, right out of the book of Revelation, what was happening in Berlin? Satan is saying, you better go where the gold is and the diamond is, because I used to walk on it. According to Ezekiel chapter 28. How, Isaiah cries out, have you fallen? How? Because you said you want to exalt your throne above the Most High. So the question is, Europe, how have you fallen? Why do you think France is fighting so hard to keep its presence in Africa? Because they all know that they obtain their wealth from the Commonwealth of Africa. But as the psalmist wrote in chapter 68, one day princes will come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia will stretch again its end unto Yah. And the blood of the slaves that were picked up from West Africa and brought to the Americas, to Britain, to Brazil, to Portugal, all over the place, that blood cries out from the ground, even as the blood of Abel cries to Yah. Why? They said, we're not our brother's keeper. Yah says that I've made all nations of one blood. One blood. And so, when you read their articles and the newspaper, this man is self-made. Liar. What clay did he use to make himself? Oh, you know, I worked hard. Really? Where? And he drives this beautiful car. And the battery needs the resources from Africa. And she flashes a ring. And you see that beautiful diamond. It's not from mayors. It's from Africa. But Yah teaches us something in that chapter 2 and verse 10. He says that Euphrates river that you saw that came from Eden, it says in Revelation, when you see the Euphrates river starting to dry up, you know the kings of the east are marching with their armies. That which rises in the east is now setting in the west. That's what's happening. You can cry all you want saying you're going to make America great again. No. You can make America no more great than they can make Babylon be rebuilt again. Or Media Persia. Or Greece. Or Rome. It's supper time. The day's far spent, and the night is at end. We have a front row seat, and we're watching the fall of Mr. Babylon. We're watching Europe come down, because there is a day appointed for all men, and the wickedness of the Amorites, it has filled their cups, and all these countries, they're fighting for resources. But you notice, in spite of the fact that they have taken everything from Africa, Africa has not run dry. Isn't that strange? And so we watch the irony that the richest continent on earth have the poorest people. And the poor from the hillsides of Europe are the rich. How did you do that? And so the eyes of Africans are opening up. Why? Because Yah did plead to us, buy thyself, so that you may see the Commonwealth of Israel. Yah said the day is coming where the wealth is going to be common among my people, my dispersed people, said Stephanus. But how do we convince the world that many of the people who claim to be something other than who they are not who they claim to be? How do we convince other people? How? It's not easy. In John chapter 7 and verse 5, he says, not even Yeshua's brothers, his own brothers, believed in him. Not even them. And so we are at that stage of history where Yah is saying, I am the one who colonized you. I am the one who gives you resources. I am the one who blessed your land. I am the one from the very inception of time allowed that river to encompass you. I'm the one. And I will restore unto you all that I have stolen from you. I'll restore your name. I'll restore your wealth. I'll restore your civility. Because they've already noised your name abroad that you're from a dark continent. And that's the continent where light came from. The word says that the Garden of Eden was in that land. So how can it be dark? And he said, when he created everything, let light come forth. Where did the light come to? Africa. Who turned it off? Who turned it off? And so the question is asked by the troubadour from Trenchtown. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and watch? How long? And of course, you will remember, if not old enough, but certainly by history, Haile Selassie in 1936, when he went to the League of Nations and he addressed them there, he said, until the philosophy that old one man superior and another inferior, until the color of a man's skin is no more significant than the color of his eye, until those ignoble regime, until we beat them down, until there's going to be war, and rumors of the same, war uptown and war downtown. Why? Because those in Constant Spring have no dealings with downtown. Constant Spring Hoppities, they don't shop in Coronation Market, they go uptown. That's where symbolizing the world. And so Yah is saying, I want to make the Commonwealth balanced. And so the word is this, that whatever denomination you think you are, you're an Israelite. You are in the Commonwealth of Israel. But they have taught you differently, to deceive you, to make you think you belong to something else, unto someone else other than who it is that colonized you. The king's name is who you're dealing with. And the king's word is law. You are not under their democracy. You are under the king. And so that's why when we read earlier this morning, you better go back there as we close. Psalm chapter 24. Psalm chapter 24. The word says, the earth belongs to Yahweh and all that fills it, the world and those that dwell in it. Did you get that? So when a man says he owns that and he owns this, liar. For he has founded it upon what? The seas. And upon the waters he does establish it. Who does go up into the mountain of Yahweh? And who does stand in his set upon place? Or his set apart place? He who what? Is innocent. He who has innocent and clean hands and a clean heart. Who did not bring his life to naught and did not swear deceivingly. He received a blessing from Yahweh and righteousness from the Elohim of his deliverance. This is the generation of those who seek him. Did you hear me? Eyes are opening up in Africa, and people are realizing who they are and know that they had been put to sleep. They had taken that pill of deceit and fell asleep. And now their eyes are waking up. Why? Because Yah said, I'm going to give you a sign. When the Euphrates River is drying up, you will see the east coming to power again. He says that. This is the generation of those who seek him. Jacob, and seek your face. Lift up your head. Lift it up. We've been downcast for a long time. We have been put in the shadows, and people have treated us and mistreated us. But he says, raise up your head, O ye gates, and lift them up, everlasting door. And let the what? The sovereign, the King of glory come in. And you're still asking, because like Thomas, you're doubting, who is the King of glory? That's what you're asking. Who is the sovereign of esteem? Yeah, strong and mighty. Mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. Even lift up, you everlasting doors, and let the sovereign of esteem come in. Who is the sovereign? Who is the King of esteem? Yahweh of hosts. He is the sovereign of esteem. He is the King. In Yeshua's name, let us make him our King. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.